My name is Mia Donovan, and I'm 28 years old. 3 months ago, at my wedding reception in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, my father grabbed the microphone during the toasts. But instead of congratulations, he announced to 300 guests that I was not his biological daughter, calling me a bastard who didn't deserve the Donovan name or a penny of inheritance. The crystal chandeliers seemed to dim as every eye turned to me in my Vera Wang dress. But what happened next changed everything, because my 85-year-old grandmother had been waiting 20 years for this exact moment. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let me take you back to how a kindergarten teacher ended up controlling a $500 million empire. The Donovan name carried weight in Boston. My father, Robert Donovan, had built Donovan Industries from a small construction firm into a $500 million real estate empire over 30 years. His Patek Philippe watch alone cost more than my annual teaching salary, a fact he mentioned whenever I visited the corporate headquarters. He divorced my mother when I was 5. The official story was irreconcilable differences, but I later learned she'd simply refused to become the trophy wife he demanded. She died in a car accident 3 years later, leaving me to navigate the Donovan world alone. By the time I was 8, Robert had married Margaret Stone, his company's CFO. Margaret arrived with her own arsenal of weapons, a Harvard MBA, a collection of Hermes Kelly bags, and an uncanny ability to make me feel invisible in my own father's house. Together, they had Victoria, my half-sister, who emerged from the womb with a silver spoon and a 5-year plan. While Victoria attended Swiss boarding schools and summer programs at Wharton, I went to public school. While she discussed quarterly projections at dinner, I talked about finger painting. Dad's jaw would tighten every time. "You're wasting your potential, Mia," he'd say, cutting his steak with surgical precision. No Donovan has ever been a glorified babysitter. The only person who never made me feel less than was Grandma Helen. At family gatherings, while Robert paraded Victoria's achievements, Helen would sit quietly in her wheelchair, an old leather briefcase always beside her. She'd been silent at most family events since Grandpa William died in 1995. But her eyes tracked everything. Sometimes I'd catch her studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Your grandfather would have loved your spirit," she told me once, when I'd graduated from college with my teaching degree. Robert had refused to attend the ceremony. He always said the best leaders serve others first. I didn't understand what she meant then. I would later. Everything changed when I met James Mitchell. He was the opposite of what my father expected. A brilliant MSA lawyer who saw my teaching career not as a weakness, but as proof of character. When he proposed after 2 years of dating, I said yes without hesitation. We announced our engagement at the monthly Donovan family dinner, held in my father's Beacon Hill mansion. The dining room, with its Waterford crystal and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, had witnessed countless humiliations. This night would be no different. "A kindergarten teacher marrying a lawyer?" Robert said, barely glancing up from his wine. "At least someone in this union has ambition." Margaret's smile was razor-sharp. "How quaint? Though perhaps a small ceremony would be more appropriate, something befitting Mia's position in the family." Victoria, fresh from her Harvard MBA graduation, twirled her champagne flute. "I assume you're not expecting Daddy to pay? I mean, my wedding budget is already allocated for next year. Theoretical wedding, of course, but one must plan ahead when marrying within one's circle." James squeezed my hand under the table, but I kept my voice steady. "We're planning to pay for everything ourselves." "Wise choice," Robert said. "Don't expect the Donovan name to open any doors for you." The only unexpected moment came when Grandma Helen, silent through most of dinner, suddenly turned to James. "You specialize in trust law, don't you?" "Among other things, yes," James replied, surprised by her interest. "Fascinating field," she murmured, her fingers drumming against that ever-present briefcase. "So many secrets hidden in proper documentation." Robert's fork clattered against his plate. Mother, surely we can discuss something more relevant than legal minutiae. But Helen just smiled, a secret dancing in her eyes that made my father visibly uncomfortable. Planning a wedding without family support taught me exactly where I stood. Robert refused any financial contribution, making it clear at every opportunity that this was Mia's little project. James and I budgeted carefully, choosing the Ritz-Carlton only because James's firm had a corporate discount. The guest list became a battlefield. Robert insisted on inviting 300 people, all business associates, potential clients, and society figures. If you're using the Donovan name on those invitations, you'll do it properly, he commanded. My list of 20 teaching colleagues was relegated to the back tables. Margaret took particular pleasure in her sabotage. During a meeting with the wedding planner, she casually mentioned to the florist, loud enough for others to hear, that I wasn't technically a full Donovan. The florist's eyes had darted between us, sensing gossip worth spreading. We're just managing expectations about Mia's position in the family, Margaret explained with practiced concern. It's only fair people know what they're celebrating. Victoria orchestrated her own cruelties. She convinced Robert to host a pre-wedding cocktail party where she was introduced to every guest as the future of Donovan Industries, our real successor. She'd chosen $50,000 worth of flower arrangements to help poor Mia's budget, ensuring everyone knew who held the purse strings. Through it all, Grandma Helen watched. One afternoon, she pulled me aside with an unusual request. "Dear, I need a copy of your birth certificate," she said, clutching that familiar briefcase. "For my memories, you understand. I like to keep important family documents." "Of course, Grandma," I replied, though something in her tone suggested this wasn't about sentimentality. She patted my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Sometimes, my dear, the most powerful weapons are the ones nobody sees coming." The morning of my wedding arrived with September sunshine streaming through the presidential suite windows. I should have been focused on my hair appointment, my dress, the photographer arriving in an hour. Instead, I watched my grandmother settle into an armchair, her weathered briefcase placed deliberately on the coffee table. "You look beautiful, dear," Helen said, though I was still in my robe. "Your grandfather would be so proud today." She opened the briefcase with reverent care, revealing stacks of documents I couldn't quite see. "I'm going to leave this in your room safe," she announced. "The combination will be your grandfather's birthday, just in case." "In case of what, Grandma?" "One never knows when truth might need documentation," she said cryptically, then turned to James, who'd stopped by to deliver my something blue, a sapphire hairpin from his mother. "Mr. Mitchell, might I suggest you keep your phone's recording application readily accessible today? Legal proceedings sometimes benefit from contemporaneous evidence." James exchanged a glance with me but nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Donovan." As Helen secured the briefcase in the safe, Victoria arrived, ostensibly to fulfill her bridesmaid duties, but really to deliver one last blow. "Daddy's updating his will next week," she announced while my makeup artist worked, making everything official about the succession. "I wanted you to know well, before you got your hopes up about anything changing after today." "I never expected anything from him, Victoria." "Good. Because the Empire needs someone who understands business, not someone who reads picture books for a living." She examined her manicured nails. "Oh, and Daddy's speech tonight? He insisted on going last, said he has something special planned." After she left, Helen took my hands. "Remember something, Mia. Your grandfather built this company from nothing, but he wasn't alone. Some truths have perfect timing, dear. Today might surprise us all." The briefcase in the safe seemed to pulse with possibility, but I pushed the thought away. This was my wedding day. What could possibly go wrong? The Ritz-Carlton Gardens bloomed with September roses as 300 guests took their seats. From the bridal suite window, I watched them arrive, a parade of Tom Ford suits and Cartier jewelry, my father's business empire in full display. My teaching colleagues clustered together, clearly overwhelmed by the opulence. Robert waited at the door, checking his Patek Philippe impatiently. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, offering his arm with all the warmth of a contract negotiation. The walk down the aisle felt endless. I heard the whispers as we passed. The teacher daughter. Can you imagine? At least she married well. Robert's jaw tightened with each comment, as if my existence personally offended him. At the altar, James waited, his eyes soft with understanding. When Robert placed my hand in his, he couldn't resist one final dig. "She's your problem now, counselor." But James just smiled, squeezing my fingers. My privilege, actually. The ceremony itself was beautiful, despite the undercurrents. When James spoke his vows, his voice carried across the garden. "Mia, you see the worth in everyone around you. Today, I promise to make sure the world sees yours." Victoria stood behind me, her bridesmaid smile painted on, but never reaching her eyes. During the ring exchange, she whispered just loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Some of us were born for this world, others just married into it." As we were pronounced husband and wife, I noticed something odd. Several Donovan Industries executives in the crowd looked distinctly uncomfortable, exchanging nervous glances. The company's entire board of directors was present, but they kept checking their phones, as if waiting for something. Walking back down the aisle as Mrs. Mitchell, I caught Grandma Helen's eye. She nodded once, slowly, deliberately. The reception was about to begin. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, you'll understand what comes next. Drop a comment. I read every single one, and your stories give me strength. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and candlelight. 300 guests found their seats while a string quartet played softly. The head table displayed the hierarchy perfectly. Robert and Margaret at the center, Victoria to their right, James and I somehow pushed to the far left, and Grandma Helen positioned where she could see everyone. The toasts began with calculated precision. Margaret went first, her Hermes clutch coordinating perfectly with her speech's backhanded compliments. "Mia has always had such simple dreams," she purred into the microphone. While some girls dream of boardrooms and stock portfolios, she dreamed of finger paintings. How quaint that she found someone who appreciates her humble ambitions. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. My teacher colleagues shifted uncomfortably while the business elite nodded approvingly. Victoria followed, raising her champagne with practiced elegance. "To my father's legacy, the real Donovan legacy that runs in the blood, not just in name. Some of us were born to lead empires, others to teach children their ABCs, to knowing one's place." "To knowing one's place," the crowd echoed, though I noticed several board members didn't raise their glasses. Tea. The business partners took their turns, each toast pointedly celebrating the Donovan Empire, while barely acknowledging my existence. One particularly bold executive actually said, "Robert, your true heir is clearly Victoria. The company's future has never looked brighter." Through it all, Robert sat silent, occasionally conferring with two men I recognized as company lawyers. They kept showing him documents on a tablet, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. Margaret leaned over, loud enough for our table to hear. "Robert's saving the best for last. He's prepared something special for tonight." The string quartet paused. The room fell silent. Robert Donovan stood, straightening his Italian suit, and walked to the microphone with the confidence of a man about to destroy something. He tapped the mic once. The sound echoed like a judge's gavel. "Before we continue this charade," Robert began, his voice cutting through the ballroom like a blade, "there's something everyone here needs to know." The champagne flute in my hand trembled slightly. James reached for my other hand under the table. 28 years ago," Robert continued, his eyes finding mine with surgical precision, "my first wife betrayed me. She had an affair. The child she claimed was mine wasn't." Gasps erupted across the room. Phones appeared in hands, recording everything. I've kept this secret to protect the family name. But watching this farce today, This teacher playing dress up in a world she doesn't belong to. I can't continue the lie. He pulled a document from his jacket. DNA test results, confirmed 3 separate times. Mia is not my biological daughter. The room erupted. 300 voices rose in shock, surprise, delight, or horror. My teaching colleagues looked stricken. The business elite leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. She is, Robert's voice rose above the noise, a bastard, and bastards don't inherit. They don't get shares. They don't get trust funds. They get nothing. Margaret stood beside him, her face a mask of false sympathy. We tried to protect her from this truth, but she insisted on this public wedding, forcing our hand. Victoria moved to her father's side, taking the microphone. The real Donovan heir stands before you. The company will pass to someone with actual Donovan blood, someone with an MBA from Harvard, not someone who reads picture books for a living. A kindergarten teacher. Robert took back the mic, his contempt absolute. Was never going to run an empire anyway. This bastard gets nothing. No inheritance, no shares, no place in Donovan Industries. After tonight, she's no longer welcome at any company property or family function. The silence that followed was deafening. 300 people stared at me in my Vera Wang dress, waiting for me to crumble. Waitstaff stood frozen, champagne bottles suspended mid-pour. The crystal chandeliers seemed to dim, as if the room itself recoiled from the cruelty. James started to rise, his face flushed with anger, but I placed my hand on his arm. "Wait," I whispered. Because at table 1, my 85-year-old grandmother was slowly, deliberately rising from her wheelchair. Helen Donovan had attended every family event for 30 years in near silence. Now, she commanded the room's attention with the simple act of standing. She moved toward Robert with measured steps, her cane clicking against the marble floor in steady rhythm. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. In her free hand, she carried a single manila envelope, aged but pristine. "Robert," she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. "You forgot something." She extended the envelope. Robert took it reflexively, his arrogance wavering for the first time. "What is this, Mother?" "The truth you never bothered to find." Helen turned to face the room, though she didn't take the microphone. She didn't need it. Everyone hung on her every word. "Since we're sharing truths tonight, perhaps it's time for all of them." Robert opened the envelope. The color drained from his face like water from a broken dam. "This is impossible," he whispered. "James?" Helen called without turning. "Would you be so kind as to retrieve my briefcase from Mia's room safe? The combination is 02312, March 12th, my late husband's birthday." James looked at me. I nodded. He left swiftly. "While we wait," Helen continued, addressing the room with quiet authority, "let me tell you about building an empire. Robert loves to talk about his 30 years of success, but Donovan Industries is 53 years old. Who do you think built the first 23? The board members exchanged knowing looks. Several pulled out their phones, typing rapidly. Margaret stepped forward. "Helen, surely this isn't the time." "Sit down, Margaret." Helen's voice could have frozen champagne. "You've played your part in this charade long enough." James returned with the briefcase, setting it on the head table. Helen opened it with practiced ease, revealing stacks of documents, each tagged and labeled with legal precision. 30 years of silence ends today," she announced, pulling out the first set of papers. "Let me tell you what really happened to Donovan Industries and why Robert was never more than an employee with delusions of grandeur." Helen lifted the first document, its gold seal catching the chandelier light. "This is the original incorporation filing for Donovan Industries, dated 1971. Notice the signatures. William Donovan and Helen Donovan, co-founders, equal partners." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several executives leaned forward, recognizing the implications immediately. My husband William and I started this company with $5,000 and a single construction contract, Helen continued. We built it together, deal by deal, building by building. By 1995, it was worth $100 million. Robert's hands shook as he examined the papers in his envelope. This doesn't change anything. Father left me the company when he died. Did he? Helen pulled out another document. This is an irrevocable trust, executed January 15th, 1995, 2 months before William's death. He knew the cancer would take him, so we made preparations. She handed copies to the nearest board members, who began reading with increasing alarm. The Donovan Family Trust owns 65% of all voting shares in Donovan Industries, Helen announced. Not directly, of course. Through a series of shell companies, Beacon Holdings, Harbor Investments, Commonwealth Partners. Names you recognize, Robert? The silent investors you've been reporting to for 30 years? That's impossible. Robert's composure cracked. I own 45% personally. You own 45% of non-voting shares, Helen corrected, a crucial distinction you never bothered to investigate. You were so eager to play CEO after William died, you signed whatever I put in front of you. Margaret grabbed the trust document, scanning frantically. This can't be legal. We would have known. Section 15.3, Helen directed calmly. The moral turpitude clause. Any CEO or board member who engages in conduct unbecoming, fraud, embezzlement, public disgrace, triggers immediate removal and forfeiture of position. The company lawyers at Robert's table were typing furiously on their phones, their faces growing paler by the second. You just publicly denounced your own daughter as illegitimate, Helen observed. Called her a bastard in front of 300 witnesses, many of whom are recording. I'd call that conduct unbecoming, wouldn't you? One of the lawyers stood abruptly. Mr. Donovan, we need to speak privately. Now. But Helen wasn't finished. She pulled out one more document, this one in a medical folder. Before we discuss succession, let's address your little DNA fiction. The truth was documented all along. Sometimes justice just needs perfect timing. If you believe in karma, hit that subscribe button. Now watch what 20 years of planning looks like. Helen opened the medical folder with deliberate care. This is Mia's original birth certificate from Massachusetts General Hospital, dated September 15th, 1996. Notice the father's name, Robert William Donovan. Your signature, Robert, witnessing the birth. That proves nothing, Robert snarled. I was deceived. This, Helen continued, pulling out another document, is the paternity test you claim proves Mia isn't yours. Interesting thing about this document, it's dated March 1999, during your divorce proceedings. The testing company, BioVerify Corp., lost their license in 2001 for falsifying results. They had a particular specialty, helping wealthy men avoid child support. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. My teacher colleagues looked vindicated while the society crowd buzzed with scandal. But the most interesting document, Helen held up a notarized affidavit, is this confession from Dr. Marcus Webb, former director of BioVerify, given as part of his plea deal in 2001. He lists every falsified test, including yours, Robert. You paid him $50,000 to manufacture false results. Margaret stumbled backward. You said the test was real. You showed me the results. You knew, Helen turned to Margaret with icy precision. You helped him hide assets during the divorce, created offshore accounts to avoid child support. I have the receipts, 22 years of receipts. She pulled out a final document, hospital records from 1996. For those still doubting, here's the genetic marker test done at birth for the hereditary kidney condition that runs in the Donovan family. Mia has it. So did William. So do you, Robert. The probability of that occurring without biological relationship? 0. Victoria grabbed the papers, reading frantically. This has to be fake. Daddy, tell them it's fake. Robert's lawyers were backing away from him now, one speaking urgently into his phone. We need the entire legal team here. Now. Yes, all of them. Every document has been authenticated by 3 independent sources, Helen announced. Notarized, verified, and legally bulletproof. Mia is your biological daughter, Robert. You've just committed defamation, fraud, and perjury in front of 300 witnesses. The truth hung in the air like a guillotine blade, waiting to fall. Helen returned to the trust document, flipping to a tabbed section. Now let's discuss succession. Section 15.3, subsection C, succession protocols. She read aloud with practiced precision. Upon triggering of the moral turpitude clause, leadership shall pass to the eldest grandchild of William and Helen Donovan, who demonstrates moral character befitting the family name. Disqualifying factors include fraud, embezzlement, academic dishonesty, or conduct unbecoming. The board members were all standing now, several on conference calls with what sounded like legal counsel. Victoria, Helen turned to my half-sister, your Harvard MBA is impressive, or it would be if it were real. She produced another folder. Harvard's registrar confirmed you were expelled for plagiarism in your second year. The graduation ceremony you attended? A elaborate fake orchestrated by your parents. The degree on your wall? Purchased online for $500. That's slander! Victoria shrieked, but her voice cracked with panic. It's documented fact, James interjected, his lawyer instincts activated. As a trust attorney, I can confirm this succession structure is ironclad. The trust owns controlling interest. The moral turpitude clause has been triggered by Robert's public statements, and Victoria is disqualified by academic fraud. Helen nodded approvingly. Which leaves Mia, a kindergarten teacher with an impeccable record, beloved by her community, who built her life without taking a penny from the family that rejected her. The trust recognizes her as the rightful heir. One of the board members, Mr. Harrison, cleared his throat. Mrs. Donovan, are you saying Mia now controls the 65% voting shares? I'm saying, Helen replied with quiet satisfaction, that according to the trust's automatic succession protocols, Mia became the controlling shareholder of Donovan Industries the moment Robert called her a bastard. The company's new chair of the board is sitting right there in her wedding dress. The room exploded. Board members rushed toward our table. Executives pulled out contracts and phones. The society photographers who'd been hired for the wedding began snapping pictures of what was becoming the business story of the year. Robert stood frozen, his empire crumbling in real time. You planned this. You've been planning this for years. 20 years to be exact, Helen confirmed. Ever since you first denied Mia her birthright. I've been waiting for you to hang yourself publicly. Tonight, you finally provided the rope. Mr. Harrison, the lead independent director, stepped forward with 4 other board members. Mrs. Donovan, if what you're saying is accurate, we need to convene an emergency board meeting immediately. Then convene it, Helen replied simply. 5 independent directors are present. That's a quorum. Harrison looked at the other directors, then at the room full of witnesses. Very well. I call this emergency meeting of Donovan Industries board to order. The motion before us. Removal of Robert Donovan as CEO per the Trust's moral turpitude clause, and appointment of Mia Donovan Mitchell as interim chair. This is insane, Robert shouted. You can't do this at a wedding. The bylaws don't specify location requirements, Harrison replied coldly. And after what we've just witnessed, immediate action is required. Discussion? Mrs. Chen, another independent director, stood. I've served on this board for 15 years. In that time, I've watched Robert systematically marginalize his eldest daughter while promoting an unqualified heir. The trust terms are clear. I see no choice. The legal liability alone from his public statements tonight could cost the company millions, added Director Thompson. He's created a hostile work environment, admitted to fraud, and destroyed shareholder confidence in leadership. All those in favor of removing Robert Donovan as CEO, Harrison called. 5 hands rose immediately. Against? Robert and Margaret couldn't vote. Conflict of interest. Victoria wasn't a board member. The motion carried 5-0. Motion passes. Robert Donovan is terminated as CEO effective immediately. Security? Harrison signaled to the hotel staff, who'd been joined by company security. Please escort Mr. Donovan and Mrs. Stone from the premises. Now, Harrison turned to me. Ms. Donovan Mitchell, will you accept the position of interim chair? I stood slowly, my wedding dress rustling in the silence. 300 people waited for my response. I accept, I said clearly. My first act as chair is to order a complete forensic audit of the past 10 years of financial records. Robert's face went from red to white. Margaret actually swayed on her feet. My second act, I continued, is to confirm Mr. Harrison as interim CEO while maintaining my teaching position. The room erupted in surprised approval. Helen wasn't finished. She pulled out a thick-bound report from her briefcase, the Deloitte logo visible on its cover. Speaking of forensic audits, I took the liberty of commissioning one 6 months ago, privately funded, completely independent. She handed copies to the board members and James. Robert, you've embezzled approximately $30 million over the past decade. The methodology was clever: inflated contractor costs, phantom consulting fees, property transfers to shell companies. But every transaction left a trail. Robert lunged for the report, but security held him back. Those were legitimate business expenses. Legitimate businesses don't route payments through the Cayman Islands, Helen observed. Page 47 details how Margaret, as CFO, created false invoices to justify the transfers. Page 86 shows how Victoria received $5 million in consulting fees for work never performed. The board members were flipping through pages, their expressions growing more horrified with each revelation. The clawback provisions in your employment contracts are quite clear, James noted, having speed-read the relevant sections. All improperly obtained funds must be returned, with interest and penalties. We're looking at roughly $45 million in total liability. Furthermore, Helen continued, I've already provided this report to the SEC and the district attorney's office. They'll be expecting you Monday morning, Robert. Margaret collapsed into a chair. Our accounts, the houses, everything's in those accounts. Everything purchased with stolen money, Helen corrected. It was never yours to begin with. Director Harrison was on his phone with company lawyers. Freeze all accounts associated with Robert Donovan, Margaret Stone, and Victoria Donovan immediately. Yes, all of them. No, I don't care that it's a Saturday night. Victoria was crying now, mascara streaming down her face. My trust fund, my apartment. Purchased with embezzled funds, I said quietly. The paper trail is extensive. You did this, Robert roared at Helen. You destroyed your own son. No, Helen replied with steel in her voice. You destroyed yourself the day you chose greed over family. I just documented it. Every transaction, every lie, every betrayal. 20 years of evidence waiting for the right moment. The security team stepped forward. Mr. Donovan, Mrs. Stone, Miss Donovan, we need you to come with us now. As they were escorted out, Robert turned back one last time, his empire in ruins, his family destroyed, his crimes exposed. The ballroom door closed with a definitive click. The ballroom remained silent as the doors closed behind my father's retreating form. 300 guests waited to see what the kindergarten teacher in the wedding dress would do with an empire. I walked to the microphone, my voice steady despite the earthquake that had just shattered my family. I want to be clear about something, I began. Tomorrow morning, I'll be back in my classroom teaching 5-year-olds how to share. That won't change. I'll serve as chair, but I'll remain who I've always been, a teacher who believes in building people up, not tearing them down. Applause started slowly, then built to genuine warmth. Effective immediately, 50% of Donovan Industries' profits will fund a new education foundation. We'll provide resources to underfunded schools, support teachers, and ensure no child is ever told they're worth less because of where they come from. The board members were nodding, some even smiling. This was the kind of PR that could transform the company's reputation overnight. As for my father and his family, I paused, choosing words carefully. They have 30 days to vacate all company properties. Victoria, despite everything, I'm offering you an entry-level position in accounting. If you publicly apologize for your role in this fraud and commit to earning your way honestly. No response came from the door they'd exited through. Mr. Harrison, I turned to the interim CEO. Please ensure all embezzled funds are recovered and returned to the company. Use them to fund employee bonuses for everyone who's worked honestly these past 10 years. The waitstaff actually applauded at that. This is the last time Robert Donovan and I will interact as family, I concluded. Power isn't about titles or bloodlines or Swiss bank accounts. It's about truth, service, and the courage to stand up when standing up seems impossible. I looked at Helen, who nodded with pride. Now, I managed a small smile. This is still my wedding reception. My husband and I would like to share our first dance. Those who wish to stay and celebrate new beginnings are welcome. Those who came for the Donovan name and status are free to leave. About 20 people headed for the exits. The other 280 stayed, raising their glasses in the first genuine toast of the evening. As the string quartet began playing our first dance song, James pulled me close on the dance floor. "You handled that with more grace than they deserved," he whispered. Around us, the reception transformed. The artificial hierarchy dissolved as executives approached my teacher colleagues, genuinely interested in their work for the first time. The waitstaff, who'd been invisible all evening, were suddenly being thanked and included in toasts. Helen took the microphone for a proper toast. To my granddaughter, who inherited the only things that truly mattered from the Donovan legacy: integrity and courage. Your grandfather William always said wealth meant nothing without wisdom. Tonight, you proved him right. The applause was genuine this time, warm and sustained. Mr. Harrison approached during the dinner service. "Ms. Donovan Mitchell, several major investors have already called. The stock futures are indicating a 30% increase for Monday's opening. The market approves of your leadership." "The market approves of accountability," I corrected. "Something Donovan Industries hasn't had in years." My kindergarten colleagues had migrated to the main tables, no longer relegated to the back. Mrs. Patterson, who'd taught beside me for 3 years, raised her glass. "I always knew you were more than you seemed, Mia, but I never imagined this." "I'm still the same person who'll be doing finger paintings on Monday," I assured her. As the evening progressed, more truth emerged. Several executives approached privately, admitting they'd suspected Robert's fraud but feared retaliation. The company's general counsel confirmed that at least a dozen whistleblower complaints had been suppressed over the years. "Your grandmother protected us," one senior manager revealed. "She's been the shadow board for decades, blocking Robert's worst impulses through those shell companies. We all knew when Beacon Holdings voted against something, it was really Helen." By midnight, as James and I cut our wedding cake, the Ritz ballroom had witnessed something unprecedented, a complete reversal of power accomplished not through corporate warfare, but through patient documentation and perfect timing. Victoria's abandoned bridesmaid bouquet lay forgotten on the head table, a silk monument to misplaced ambition. Monday arrived with a media storm. The Boston Globe ran the headline, "Wedding Coup. Teacher inherits empire after father's public disgrace." By 9 a.m., Donovan Industries stock had risen 32%, the biggest single-day gain in company history. I attended the emergency board meeting between teaching my morning and afternoon kindergarten classes, still wearing the finger paint-stained cardigan that had become my trademark. The contrast with the mahogany boardroom wasn't lost on anyone. "The forensic audit revealed additional irregularities," Harrison reported. "Robert diverted $8 million more than initially discovered. The FBI has upgraded the investigation to interstate wire fraud." By Wednesday, Robert was arrested at his Beacon Hill mansion. The perp walk made national news, the mighty CEO in handcuffs, his empire dissolved in a single evening. He was charged with 47 counts of embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion. Margaret turned state's witness within 48 hours, providing prosecutors with detailed records she'd secretly maintained for insurance. Her lawyer negotiated a plea deal, 3 years probation and full cooperation in exchange for avoiding prison time. She kept everything, the lead prosecutor told me. Every email, every falsified document, every offshore transfer. She knew this day might come. Victoria's situation proved even more pathetic. Harvard confirmed they'd been trying to locate her for 2 years regarding the fraudulent graduation claims. Her consulting firm never existed. The IRS opened their own investigation into unreported income. Within a week, she was working as a receptionist at a small accounting firm in Worcester, her first real job at 24. The SEC filing confirming my position as chair went through Thursday. The company implemented new transparency measures, including live-streamed board meetings and quarterly employee town halls. Employee morale soared. The Education Foundation launched with $10 million in initial funding. Applications for Donovan Industries positions increased 400% once word spread about the new leadership's values. Robert's trial was set for spring. His lawyer requested a plea deal, but prosecutors refused. With Helen's 20 years of documented evidence and Margaret's testimony, conviction was virtually guaranteed. He faced 8 to 15 years in federal prison. The evidence is overwhelming, the district attorney announced at a press conference. This case will set a precedent for corporate accountability. 3 months after the wedding, Donovan Industries had transformed. The executive floor, once a fortress of mahogany and intimidation, now housed a state-of-the-art employee daycare center. Every Thursday, I brought my kindergarten class for field trips, teaching them about different careers while executives got on the floor to help with art projects. Miss Mia's company became my students' favorite destination. They didn't know their teacher was worth $300 million on paper. They just knew she still sat cross-legged on the carpet for story time and never missed a single school day. Robert's sentencing made headlines. 8 years in federal prison, no possibility of early release. He'd aged a decade in 3 months, his signature arrogance replaced by hollow defeat. He never looked at me during the sentencing. I didn't attend. I had parent-teacher conferences that day. Margaret received 3 years probation as promised. She moved to Florida, living on the $50,000 yearly allowance the court permitted from her frozen assets. She sent one letter apologizing, which I returned unopened. Victoria surprised everyone. After hitting rock bottom, she enrolled in community college night classes, keeping her receptionist job during the day. She sent a public apology letter to the Boston Globe, acknowledging her fraud and expressing genuine remorse. I didn't respond, but I didn't block her efforts to rebuild either. Helen moved into our Cambridge townhouse, her health fragile, but her spirit triumphant. Every evening, she'd sit with her tea while I graded papers, and James reviewed contracts, our unconventional family finding its rhythm. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she told me one evening, watching me prepare lesson plans while simultaneously reviewing quarterly reports. He always said the best leaders never forget where they came from. The Education Foundation had already funded supplies for 200 classrooms and provided scholarships for 50 first-generation college students. The Thursday field trips became so popular that we launched a city-wide program connecting businesses with elementary schools. My two worlds, classroom and boardroom, merged in ways Robert never could have imagined. Every Thursday, I traded the boardroom for the classroom, and neither role suffered for it. On Helen's 86th birthday, 6 months after the wedding, she called James and me into her room. The briefcase that had changed everything sat open on her bed, nearly empty now, except for one final envelope. "There's something else you should know," she said, her voice softer than usual. I knew about Robert's embezzlement from the beginning. Every transaction, every theft, every lie. I sat down slowly. For 20 years? I documented everything, waiting. She pulled out the envelope. It contained photographs of receipts, dates, amounts, going back to 2004. I could have stopped him any time, but I needed him to destroy himself completely, publicly, undeniably. "Why?" James asked, though I think we both already knew. Because quiet justice would have meant quiet reform. The company, the culture, the toxic legacy, it all needed to burn publicly to be rebuilt properly. She took my hand. And you, my dear, needed to be old enough, strong enough, and far enough removed to be the phoenix that rose from those ashes. She showed us the final document, a private investigator's report from 2001, confirming Robert had falsified the DNA test. I've known you were his biological daughter all along, but I let him believe his own lie, let him treat you as lesser, let him build his empire on cruelty. Her eyes glistened. Can you forgive an old woman for using your pain as a weapon against him? I squeezed her weathered hand. You saved me from becoming him. The distance he forced kept me human. Patience isn't passive, she smiled, echoing what would become her most famous quote in the business books written about our story. It's strategic, and 20 years of patience brought perfect justice. That night, I understood the full weight of inheritance, not money or companies, but the long game of truth waiting for its moment. Looking back now, I gained an empire but lost a father, though I'm not sure I ever really had him to lose. The Donovan Industries Tower still bears our name, but it represents something entirely different now. Accountability, service, second chances for everyone except those who had every chance and squandered them all. Robert will be eligible for parole in 6 years. I won't be at the hearing. Margaret sends Christmas cards I don't open. Victoria, to her credit, finished her associate degree and works honestly now, though we'll never be sisters. The family I was born into dissolved, but the family I chose, James, Helen, my students, my colleagues, that's real. Helen passed last spring at 87, peacefully, knowing her patient justice had prevailed. Her funeral drew thousands, employees, teachers, students, everyone whose life she'd quietly touched while playing the long game against corruption. Her final words to me: power isn't inherited, dear. It's earned by those willing to wait, document, and strike when the moment demands courage. I still teach kindergarten every morning. I still chair board meetings Thursday afternoons. I gained an empire, but lost a father. The trade was worth it. If you've made it this far, you understand that sometimes the best revenge is patient documentation. What would you have done in my position? Share your thoughts below. I personally read every comment. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by those who refuse to see it. Thank you for witnessing my truth.